Hello, dear viewers of the channel. Today I'd like to share with you this video about Fayoum mummy portraits. In the beginning, I'd like to give you an introduction about the town of Fayoum and also an introduction about the Roman era in Egypt, as the town of Fayoum was the town where most of the mummy portraits were found, and the Roman era or the Roman period was the era where most of these mummy portraits were made. El Fayoum. In Arabic, El Fayoum, in Coptic, Fium or Fium, is a city in Middle Egypt located 100 kilometers or 62 miles southwest of Cairo, in the Fayoum Oasis. It is the capital of the modern Fayoum Governorate, originally called Shidit in ancient Egypt. The Greek called it Crocodilopolis or Crocodilopolis. The Romans Arsinoe. It is one of Egypt's oldest cities due to its strategic location. Roman Egypt, from 30 BC to 641 AD, after Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, defeated his rival Mark Antony, deposed Queen Cleopatra VII, and annexed the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt to the Roman Empire. And here we have these three statues. This one is representing the Roman Emperor Augustus, and this one is showing Mark Antony, and here we have Cleopatra VII. And now we come to some information about the mummy portraits of Fayoum. Mummy portraits or Fayoum mummy portraits is the modern term given to a type of naturalistic painted portrait on wooden boards attached to Egyptian mummies from Roman Egypt. They belong to the tradition of panel painting, one of the most highly regarded forms of art in the classical world. In fact, the Fayoum portraits are the only large body of art from that tradition to have survived. Mummy portraits have been found across Egypt, but are most common in the Fayoum Basin, particularly from Hawara in the Fayoum Basin, hence the common name, and the Hadrianic Roman city Antinopolis. Fayoum portraits is generally thought of as a stylistic rather than a geographic description. While painted cartonnage mummy cases date back to pharaonic times, the Fayoum mummy portraits were an innovation dating to the Coptic period at the time of the Roman occupation of Egypt. The portraits date to the Imperial Roman era, from the late 1st century BC or the early 1st century AD onwards. It is not clear when their production ended, but recent research suggests the middle of the 3rd century. They are among the largest groups among the very few survivors of the highly prestigious panel painting tradition of the classical world, which was continued into Byzantine and Western traditions in the post-classical world, including the local tradition of Coptic iconography in Egypt. The portraits covered the faces of bodies that were mummified for burial. Extant examples indicate that they were mounted into the bands of cloth that were used to wrap the bodies. Among all have now been detached from the mummies. They usually depict a single person showing the head or head and upper chest viewed frontally. In terms of artistic tradition, the image clearly derives more from Greco-Roman artistic traditions than Egyptian ones. Two groups of portraits can be distinguished by technique of encaustic or wax paintings and in tempera. The former, which is wax paintings, are usually of higher quality. Now we come to each technique separately to talk about. First, the technique of wax or encaustic. Encaustic is from Greek enkaien, to burn in. Here, the colored pigments are mixed with liquid wax and applied with a brush while still hot to cover a thin ground coat, while the medium is still warm. A spatula-like tool or sharp instrument is used to fuse the layers of color together and bring out such details as the eyebrows. This method, used mostly for the skin, not only strengthens the artistic effect of the portrait, but also gives the surface a lifelike structure. The second technique, tempera. It is a method of painting with pigments dispersed in an emulsion, miscible, with water, typically egg yolk. The method was used in Europe for fine painting, mainly on wood panels, from the 12th or early 13th century until the 15th, when it began to give way to oils. Emulsion used in tempera painting, egg tempera. About 900 mummy portraits are known at present. The majority were found in the necropolis of Fayoum. Due to the hot, dry Egyptian climate, the paintings are frequently very well preserved, often retaining their brilliant colors seemingly unfaded by time. And now I will show you a web page from Wikipedia telling us about some of these mummies and their locations around the world. Here we have this page from Wikimedia about Fayoum mummy portraits and about their locations around the world. In the UK, there is a group in the British Museum in London, also in Petrie Museum in London, in Windsor, Eton College Myers Collection, in Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, in the Royal Museum of Scotland, Edinburgh, in Russia, in Pushkin Museum in Moscow, a total of 22, and here we have some of them illustrated. In Germany, Egyptisch Museum, which is now Neues Museum in Berlin, in Antiken Sammlung im Neuen Museum in Berlin, in Altes Museum, also in Berlin, in Staatliche Antiken Sammlungen in München, in Munich, in Kästner Museum in Hannover, in Ägyptisches Museum Leipzig, in Austria Kunst Historisches Museum in Vienna, in Poland National Museum in Warsaw, in Italy in the Archaeological Museum in Florence, in France we have also a big collection actually in the Louvre Museum in Paris, and here we have just examples. Also in France, in Musée du Beaux-Arts de Dijon, the Museum of Fine Arts. It's a museum of fine arts. In Denmark, also we have in Copenhagen, also we have a collection. In the United States, we have also a big collection in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, in New York. We have also this collection. In Brooklyn Museum, New York, we have also this collection. In Buffalo, we have Albright Knox Gallery, Cleveland Museum of Art, Getty Museum in Los Angeles, Menil Collection in Houston, Milwaukee Art Museum in Wisconsin. In Canada, also we have in the Royal Ontario Museum. In Egypt, unfortunately, we have a very few number of these mummy portraits, and also the collection in the Egyptian Museum is not to compare with the collection outside Egypt. The collection outside Egypt is more bigger and a better state of preservation and more beautiful and more elaborate. Also, we have a collection or an example of a collection with location not indicated, right? Some of women and men. So this is actually some information about Fayoum mummy portraits outside or scattered around the world. The reason actually behind choosing this subject, which is the Fayoum mummy portrait, is because this subject is shedding a lot of light on one of the less known early Roman era in Egypt. This subject is telling us a lot about the burial customs and about the funerary customs at the time. Also, it is telling us a lot about Egyptian faces from that time. Telling us about faces, about costumes, dresses, the fashion at the time, the hairstyles, and the lovely, amazing jewelry of women at that time. And now we come to the Fayoum mummy portraits in details. We will talk about a collection, and this collection is including some of the most famous and the most beautiful mummy portraits of this collection and this type of art. First, we have a collection of men mummy portraits. Here we have a mummy inside a mummy case and a portrait of a Greek youth aged between 19 and 21 named Artemidorus in a cartonnage dating back to the Roman period, about the 2nd century AD, the early of the 2nd century AD. between 100 and 120 AD. Excavated in Hawara, Middle Egypt, Fayoum. The materials are consisting of plaster, linen, lime wood, human tissue, and gold. And the technique used here, leaf gilded, and the paintings encaustic. The dimensions, the length of it is 171 centimeters. There are also inscriptions on the mummy, inscription position on the chest, inscription language is in Greek, and the inscription translation, O Artemidoros, farewell, and this inscription is painted in one line. This mummy is actually now in the British Museum in London in the UK. It is on display. This piece actually was also displayed outside the British Museum. Between 1997, the 22nd of October, till the 30th of April 1998, it was displayed in Italy, in Rome. The condition of the mummy is good. Acquisition name, donated, it was donated by Henry Martin Kennard, and the acquisition date is 1888. It is inside the British Museum in the Department of Ancient Egypt and the Sudan. This mummy of this Greek youth, and we said that he aged between 19 and 21 years old, named Artemidoros, in a cartonnage body case with mythical decoration in gold leaf and an encaustic on lime wood portrait panel covering the face and the inscription on the chest. There is an inscription in Greek on the mummy case. The mummified body is enclosed in a red painted stucco casing. A portrait panel has been inserted at the head of the case. It is painted in encaustic. Below the portrait is a falcon collar and a series of traditional Egyptian funerary scenes applied in gold leaf. The identity of the dead man is preserved in a short, misspelled Greek inscription across the breast, which reads, Farewell, Artemidoros. This mummy represents an excellent example of the merging of cultural influences, a Greek personal name, a Roman-style portrait, together with traditional Egyptian funerary practices. Artemidoros was probably between 18 and 21 when he died, which is in keeping with the eye suggests by the mummy portrait. This mummy portrait is described by Mary Beard. She is an English scholar and classicist, as portraying a cosmopolitan way of death and a wonderful amalgam of the traditions of Egypt, of Greece, and of Rome. Here we have Egyptian decorative element. Here we can see the two goddesses, Isis and Nephthys, on the sides, 1 and 2. Also we can see the god Anubis, the god of mummification in ancient Egypt with the head of a jackal. And also we can see the mummy of the deceased lying on the bed of resurrection with the head of a lion. Also here we can see the god Horus with the double crown of ancient Egypt at the head, and the god Thoth, the god of wisdom and knowledge, and also he was the scribe in the final judgment with the head of the ibis bird, and they are on the sides of the spinal cord or the vertebral column of the god Osiris. Here also we can see the god Osiris himself with his insignia in the hands, with his characteristic crown lying on the bed of resurrection. And here we have the feet of the deceased, gilded wood, a leaf of gold. And what is remarkable here is that the sandals are Roman style. So actually it is a combination of ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Roman styles. And here we have this mummy portrait, perhaps of a priest in encaustic on lime wood. The background is greenish cream, dating back to the Roman period from 140 to 160 AD, excavated in Hawara. It is made of wood. The materials is lime wood and wax. The height is 42.5 centimeters, width 22.2 centimeters, and the thickness is of 4 millimeters. It was excavated by Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie, excavated in 1911. It is in the British Museum in London in England. And here, in his hair, the subject wears a narrow fillet with a central gold star with 7 points laid on a purple ground. It is suggested that the star and the corkscrew locks on the brow could represent the deceased as the god Serapis. And here we have this panel with mummy encaustic portrait of a bearded man with red wine and rose petal wreath. Discovered in El-Rubaiyat in El-Fayoum Governorate, dating back to the Roman period, about 220 to 250 AD. The medium of this panel is tempera on wood. The dimensions, the width is 25 centimeters and the height 34 centimeters. It is now in the J. Paul Getty Museum, currently on view at the Getty Villa in Gallery 210 in Getty Museum, Los Angeles, USA. And here, gazing out for eternity, the man depicted on this Roman Egyptian mummy portrait holds the symbol of his salvation. He has a glass filled with red liquid, presumably wine, and the color red in general was associated with the life in Egyptian thought, and more specifically with rebirth in a funerary context. The garland of pink flowers in his other hand marks the man as an initiate in the cult of the goddess Isis, who offered her followers a happy, carefree afterlife. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man. Maybe his name is Pobilio Bisogno Filero, and he is described as a freedman. This mummy portrait is following the encaustic style of paintings, and it is on wood. It is dating back to the Roman period and to the 2nd century AD. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man found in Hawara in El Fayoum Governorate, dating back to the Roman period, specifically to the 2nd century AD. It is made of wood with golden frame. It is now in the British Museum in London in Great Britain. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man, showing him as a middle-aged man, and we don't know further information about the location of this mummy portrait of this on this moment. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man. It is encaustic painting on wood, dating back to the Roman period, to the 2nd century, and it is now kept in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo in Egypt. And here, look at the amazing face features, which are pure Egyptian, concerning the tint of color of the skin, reddish brown color. Look at also the eyes. The eyes are also of Egyptian features, the mustache, the beard, the hairstyle, except the Roman dress. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man from Panopolis, which is Amim in southern Egypt, dating back to the Roman period, and it is dating back between 160 to 170 AD. Wood. And it is now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York City, USA. And again, the style of the robe and the dress is Roman, but again, the face features is purely Egyptian, concerning the face countenance, the eyes, the cheeks, nose. And here we have this mummy portrait of a young man. It is wax, tempera, made on wood, dating back to the Roman period, early 3rd century, and it is of 37.5 centimeters high. It is now in the Staatliche Antiken Sammlungen, or State Collections of Antiquities, in Munich or München in Germany. Here, when we talk about this mummy portrait, the young man is in a Roman clothing. Hair and beard are made in the modern way. This time, he belongs to the Greco-Roman upper class. And again, look at the beautiful details and amazing face countenances and features. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man dating back to the Roman period, between the 2nd and the 3rd century AD. It is now in the Louvre Museum in France, in Paris. And here we have this portrait of a thin-faced man with wreath of gold on his head. It is dating back to the Roman period between 140 AD to 170 AD. The medium is encaustic, lime wood, and gold leaf. Dimensions of the piece: the height is 42.3 centimeters and the width is 18.7 centimeters. It is credited to Rogers Fund 1909. The current locations of the piece is the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City in the United States of America. To talk more about this piece, this man's intent, direct gaze, and parted lips make him seem restive. The remarkably free brushwork builds up forms without reliance on clean contours. The portrait has striking atmospheric qualities, such as the strands of seemingly damp hair that cling on the man's brow. The gilding of the wreath and background was added after the panel had been inserted into the mummy wrapping. Here also note the pure Egyptian face, features, and countenance. In the eyes, in the nose, and the cheekbones, in the eyebrows, actually all such amazing details of a pure Egyptian face. And here we come to this mummy portrait, lime wood panel bearing portrait in encaustic and tempera of naked young man with curly hair, dating back to the Roman period between 80 and 120 AD, fine spot Hawara, the materials wax, oil, lime wood, and egg. The technique is tempera and term details encaustic. The dimensions of the piece: height 35.8 centimeters, width 20.7 centimeters, thickness 1.5 millimeter. Exhibition history of the piece: the piece was exhibited in Rome and Italy between the 22nd of October 1997 to the 30th of April 1998. The piece now is in the British Museum in London in the United Kingdom. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man, now kept in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo in Egypt. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man, province. It was found in the province of Thebes, Upper Egypt, dating back to the Roman period, about 250 AD, the 2nd century AD. It is made of wood, and now it is displayed in the Louvre Museum in France in Paris. And here, note the amazing details of the thick eyebrows and the eyelashes. And here we have this mummy portrait of a young man. It is now in the Pushkin State Museum of Fine Arts in Moscow, in Russia. And unfortunately, on the internet, I couldn't find a colored photo of this mummy portrait. And also, there isn't much information about this piece on the internet. And here we have this mummy portrait of a young man, also in the Pushkin State Museum of Fine Arts in Moscow. And here we have pharaonic influence on this piece. Two representations of the god Anubis, as we can see here on the sides of the face. Two ladies representing the goddesses Isis and Nephthys. A representation of a falcon, or the god Horus, the god of the sky in ancient Egypt, and a representation on the left hand side, as you can see, of a hippopotamus and of a jackal, and the Roman influence on this piece is in the form of the objects in the hands of the deceased, which we have seen in earlier mummy portraits. And here we have this mummy portrait of a young man. Here we can see such amazing details of thick eyebrows, wide eyes, thin moustache, straight hair, and it is dating back to the Roman period between 100 and 200 AD. It is now in the Mediterranean Museum in Stockholm in Sweden. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man, and it is following the artistic style of tempera. The piece is dating back to the Roman period, about the late 3rd century AD. It is tempera, painting on wood, and it is 38.7 by 21.9 centimeters. And this one actually is now in Sotheby's auction. And it has a price tag estimated between 100,000 to 150,000 US dollar. And when we talk about this piece, it is turned slightly to his right and wearing a white chiton, himation, and red clavi. His youthful face with short beard and moustache, full bow-shaped lips, and furrowed brow beneath the thick, richly curly hair. And here we have this mummy portrait of a young man dating back to the Roman period between 100 and 199 AD. It is tempera on wood. It is 31 by 16.5 centimeters. It is now in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston and of the Abbott Lawrence Fund, USA. And here we have this mummy portrait of a young bearded man dating back to the Roman period, about 150 AD. It is encaustic on wood, 39 by 21 centimeters. It is now in the Altes Museum or Old Museum, which houses the Antiken Sammlung or Antiquities collection of the Berlin State Museums in Berlin in Germany. And here we have this mummy portrait of a bearded man in encaustic, acquired by Henry Walters, 1912, dating back to the Roman period, about 170 to 180 AD. It is encaustic, wax, and pigments on wood, painting and drawing. The height is 40.5 centimeters and the width 20 centimeters. Found in El Fayoum and maybe in El Rubaiyat. It is now in the Center Street, second floor of the Egyptian Art Walters Art Museum in Baltimore in the United States. And when we talk about this piece, we can see that he looks almost Byzantine or Greek, gazing dew-eyed over the viewer's left shoulders, his mouth forming a slight pout like a star-struck lover, or perhaps a fan of the races witnessing his favorite charioteer losing control of his horses. Very strange description. But this description, actually, I found it on the internet. Yeah, and actually I'm trying to collect everything about the piece from different websites, and this is what I found. Strange description, but yeah. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man wearing an ivy wreath. Ivy or ivy wreath, dating back to the Roman period, early to the mid-2nd century AD. It is of lime or linden wood. Also has beeswax, pigments, gold, textile, and natural resin. The dimensions. The height is 39.4 centimeters, the width 22 centimeters, and the thickness is 2 millimeters. The depth with support is 3.5 centimeters. It is this mummy portrait is a gift of Emily Crane, Chadbourne, and it is now in the Roman art at the Art Institute of Chicago. The Art Institute of Chicago is in Chicago, Illinois, United States. And here we have this mummy portrait of a young man from Philadelphia, dating back to the Roman period, 1st century AD, from the Museum of Art History, also often referred to as the Museum of Fine Arts. And it is an art museum in Vienna, in Austria, in Europe. And here we have this portrait of a senior man. You can see that he is an aged man, an old man. It is tempera on wood from El Fayum, dating back to the Roman period and to the 4th century AD. It is wood, and it is now in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, in Egypt. And again here, the face features is pure Egyptian, and also look at the dark color skin of the man. But the Roman style is very clear in the dress. And here we have this mummy funerary portrait of an old man. It is tempera on wood, dating back to the Roman period, from the 1st to the 2nd century AD, and it is now in Seattle Art Museum, Washington, USA. And here we have this mummy portrait of a man, acquired by Henry Walters, 1913, dating back to the Roman period, to the late 1st century AD, encaustic style, wax and pigments on wood, painting and drawing. The height is 39.4 centimeters, the width 20.5 centimeters, place of origin El Fayum. It is now in Center Street, 3rd floor, Early Byzantine Art Department, of the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, USA. And here we have this portrait of a youth with a surgical cut in one eye. Amazing. Getting back to the Roman period, between 190 to 210 AD, the medium is encaustic paint on lime wood. The dimensions, the height 35 centimeters, width 17.2 centimeters. And it is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York in the United States. When we talk about this mummy portrait, more details about it, the faint growth of hair on the jaws and upper lip identify the subject of this painting as a youth. Remarkably, his right eye seems to show signs of an abnormality that has been treated. The grayish fold of skin below the lower lid, the lack of lashes, and the slightly slack right cheek may be traces of abnormality. The straight line of the lower lid suggests a surgical cut to relieve the condition. Amazing details. And here we have distemper painting on wooden panel of two brothers from El Fayoum, dating back to the Roman period to the 2nd century AD, and now it is in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo in Egypt. And for more details about this piece, the technique of distemper on wood used pigments mixed with milk protein, binder, and the effect was a flat, thin color more associated with frescoes than the expressive potentials of encaustic painting. Oh, this is something new.